something I kind of want to speak about in short, and that is the idea of projection. I think one of the reasons that Christians and atheists miss one another in their conversations is we are generally projecting our own worldview and rationality on the other person. So the Christian, who generally, if he's studied apologetics or epistemology, has a well thought out reason for what he believes, and he's seeking to convey that to the best of his ability. When he hears an objection, he makes the assumption that the person who objects is objecting on the grounds of truth and epistemology and evidence and metaphysics. This is not the case with atheists. I hope to clear up in short, but atheists don't care about metaphysics. They don't care about rational categories. Richard Dawkins has become famous for being laughed off the stage as he said, and I quote, "Nothing is actually something." That's you. If you can't wrap your head around that, it's because it's not possible for a rational person to wrap their head around. That is the forsaking of the laws of logic, which have upheld the Western culture since the Western culture has existed. You have to realize that we're kind of missing one another, but it's the same thing with atheists. They project their, might I say, ignorance upon us, thinking that because they isolate themselves to one singular authority, their lab coats and test tubes, they think Christians do the same thing with something like the Bible or some spiritual revelation we have or something like that. Christians look at a lot of different evidences. We look at a lot of different avenues of truth and knowledge. You guys are the ones who isolate yourself to the test tubes and the numbers which contradict themselves every 10 to 20 years. We actually take the scope of human knowledge and wisdom, and we're happy to look at the test tubes, but we look at them in the light of everything else. We're not isolationist, we're not empiricist. We don't deny rationality just because it helps us collect numbers better in the immediate. But I think it will help the conversation to realize if you're educated on a broad range of topics and you're approaching someone who's educated on one topic at best, you have to realize they're going to project what they assume to be infallible knowledge on that singular topic on everything. They're going to overlay it on everything. We do have a category of Christians who do this. We call them fundamentalist. They don't study science. They don't study epistemology. They don't study metaphysics. I'm speaking broadly. I'm speaking of those Christians who don't do those things. They study one thing, the Bible and the King James English, baby. And then they overlay that over everything. And we all have a hassle dealing with our family who are fundies, and it's just like, it's terrible. It's awful talking to them. It's exactly like talking to atheists. They conceal themselves to one kind of knowledge, overlay that knowledge claim over everything, and deny anything which they believe in their own interpretation, limited as it may be. They deny anything which would seek to contradict it. It's a vacuous conversation. And so what you have to realize when you're talking to an atheist is don't project your worldview on him. Atheist, if you're talking to Christians, don't project your worldview on us. We don't hold ourselves to one singular strand of knowledge as though nothing else in the world matters but what it says in John 3:16. We look at the Bible as an infallible source of knowledge, but we look at all other kinds of knowledge. We look at epistemology. We're famous for studying the Greeks, and actually the reason you have their literature, you can thank Christians for that. Christians have no problem holding to the infallibility of Scripture as an absolute standard of knowledge, while also simultaneously holding to and seeking out other avenues of knowledge endeavors, whether it be epistemology and metaphysics, or whether it be the sciences, which were started by Christians in the West. You're welcome, by the way. It's all in order that we might have a well-informed knowledge of the world, not one tiny little part of the world, which we're then going to overlay over everything like a bunch of irrational lunatics, but the whole world and the whole knowledge which comes through that world. These new atheist and neo-Darwinian types do not believe in metaphysics, generally. They pride themselves on the fact that they don't study philosophy, which is pretty much like someone accusing you of being an idiot and being like, well, yeah, because I don't study intelligence. It's really stupid. I'm sorry, that was probably really rude, but I'm still going to post it. And so with all that being said, I want to clarify, not everyone studies epistemology. Not everybody studies metaphysics. Not everybody studies theology. Not everybody studies the sciences. What we can do is not be fundamentalist about it, which the atheist and, certain religious fundamentalists do, is take one idea of knowledge that you may have studied and you've studied it as opposed to everything else, and then overlay that over everything. And I think it can be really dangerous to do so. We're full people. We're fully formed. We have an understanding of not just singular things, but the broad understanding of how those things fit into other things. We ought to do this. And again, Christians are doing this. It is generally the atheist or the radical fundamentalist who seek to study one avenue of knowledge and then overlay it over the whole, denying anything which contradicts their own reason inside their brain. And that, I believe, is a big problem. It's not constructive to any real conversation. So hopefully we can get over this fallacy.